In this presentation, we'll record a transaction related to net assets being released from restrictions in our QuickBooks Not-for-Profit practice problem within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our practice problem. We currently have the open windows open. You could open the open windows by going to the View dropdown and selecting the Open Windows list. We're now going to take a look at the Excel worksheet to get an idea of what our objective will be. We're going to be down here on number 6B. 6B says in our instructions that we have the short-term investments sold. We recorded that. Proceeds used to purchase computer and printers, and then the resources used were restricted. So what we're going to do then is say that we sold the investments, and we did that so that we can purchase equipment. And then as we purchased the equipment, it released some of the net assets from restriction. And so whenever that happens, we want to make sure that we record that release from restriction as part of our not-for-profit process. So first, we're going to have the recording of the equipment. Fairly straightforward, just like we would have in a for-profit type of organization. We're going to purchase equipment. We're going to purchase it with cash. Therefore, equipment is going to go up. Cash is going to be going down. Debit to the equipment, an asset account. Credit to cash, an asset account. Notice we're not putting it into an expense because the equipment is going to be something that's long-term that we will expense in the form of depreciation over time. So we're going to go back up top. We're going to say then equipment. We are in cell R7. Within R7, we're going to say equals. Scroll over to that 2008.55 and enter. And we see it goes up in the debit direction. Then we're going to go to cash. Cash has a credit balance. So we're going to go up top. We're going to be in cell R3. Within R3, we're going to say equals. Scroll over to that 2855 and enter. And we see that debit balance then going down in the credit direction to the 14,521. There's no effect on what would be the net income down below because, again, we put it on the books as an asset. It's going to be a long-term type of asset as the purchase. Let's take a look at what we would do in QuickBooks for a similar type of situation. If we go back over to QuickBooks, then we're going to make the purchase. I'm going to make the purchase by simply writing a check. That would be the form easiest to use since the checking account is going down. So let's go ahead and write a check. And this is going to be the check form. We're going to make this check as of, let's make it as of, let's make it as of 01/25/20. And the check amount was for the 2855. So we're going to make this as of 2855. And we're going to include the vendor. Let's call it Home Depot this time. Depot. Tab, I'm going to quick add the Home Depot as a vendor. Tab. We're going to be on the expenses tab. We're going to say the expense is going to be to equipment. So we have an equipment account. It's going to be a fixed asset type of account. So it's going to be up top on the balance sheet. And there we have that. We don't need anything in the customer field. Within the class field, we're going to make it the fundraising. So we'll put it into fundraising. For now, and then we'll do the allocation of it at a later point in time. So we'll go ahead and record that. So we're going to say save and close and yes. And then let's take a look at the reports that will be generated. Let's look at the trial balance. We're going to go to the reports drop down, company and financial. Actually, we'll go to the accounting and taxes and then the trial balance. Within the trial balance, we're going to change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And there we have that. And then the checking account, of course, has been affected. Let's make this a little bit larger as well. Let's go to the customized reports up top. We're going to go to the fonts and numbers, change the font size. Let's make it number 11. Okay. Yes, please. And okay. So then we have in the checking account, double clicking the checking account. We see that 2008.55 there, closing that back out. The other side going into the equipment account, another asset account, double clicking on it. We see the 2008.55 there as well. So now let's go back to Excel and see the second component. We saw that this then was something that was allowing us to unrestrict some of the net assets. So that's going to be our next piece right here. I'm going to make this green. I'm going to unblue this. And the two accounts that represent that unrestriction are going to be down here. The net assets released, satisfaction of purpose restriction, and then without donor restrictions, net assets released, satisfaction of purpose restriction with the donor restrictions. I would think of these basically as revenue type of accounts. We want the one that does not have restrictions to be going up. It's going to go up in the credit direction. So this one's going to be going up then in the credit direction with this 2,855 credit. And then this one is going to be going down, or you can think of it as an expense going up in the debit direction. So no net effect then on what would be like the net income down below, because one went up, one went down. However, when we break this out into another dimension, another column, then it's going to be looking something like this in our statement of activities. It's going to be broken out down here for the net assets released from restriction. It's going to be reducing the one with restrictions and increasing the one without restrictions. So let's take a look at that then. How would we put that into QuickBooks? Note we have a bit of an added difficulty here to put this in place, and that is that we want to basically be able to label the classes to make it break out between restricted and unrestricted. And we also want to be able to give more detail on the restricted item. And for that, we're going to be using the jobs feature. So let's go back into QuickBooks, see what that would look like. We're going to say that go back to the home tab. Now we can't just use a journal entry like we might want to do here. We might want to go, let's go to the company and financial, make a journal entry and just use those debits and credits. We can't do that because there's no job field here, and we want to be able to track this in the jobs to track the restricted items. So I'm going to close this back out, and instead we need to pick a form that we're going to use. One easy form to use is going to be the check, and we'll write basically a 0 check, but we'll use the check in order to make a journal entry and be able to use the customer tab here in the job tab. Now, as you do that, in that case, you want to use basically a clearing account typically. Otherwise, you're going to have these 0 checks in your checking account, and this is just used for a clearing account. So I'm going to use the clearing account and then basically just use the expenses tabs down below to record the journal entry. So we're going to have this satisfaction net assets released. So I'm going to copy this down here, net assets released. Go back. We're going to paste it down here, and then we're going to say net assets released. Let's say unrestricted. And I'm going to set that up. Now I'm going to set it up as an income account. You could set it up as other income, but notice if you look at our statement over here in Excel, they have it basically set up as an income, or we have it set up basically as up top in the statement of activities in the income section. If you put it into other income, it'll kind of be down below on the bottom portion, which could be nice because then you'll have it without this basically adjustment, and then you could put that adjustment down below. So that's an option for you. However, I'm going to keep it up top, so I'm going to line it up in the income section. We're going to say continue. So this is going to be the unrestricted. I'm going to say save. I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that we can see the whole thing. The amount is going to be for, scroll back over and pick up the amount, the 2855. So it's going to be the 2855 in the amount. And you may want to put a memo for what the restriction was or what the restriction was released. I'm not going to put one here. And then we have the customer job. We don't need one because this is the unrestricted portion. The class, we're going to need something in the class. I'm going to put it into the fundraising for now. Then I'm going to go back to the second half, and we're going to say net assets, and this is going to be restricted. Net assets restricted. We're going to set that up. Once again, an income type of account, not an expense. Going to say continue. And then we're going to keep everything here. We're going to say save. And then we're going to have the second component to it. Now note, again, the check up here should be 0. So then really the question is down here, should these be increasing or decreasing? Let's think about this over a little bit more thoroughly. If we have the check, normally the check would be a decrease to cash or a credit to cash. And then the positive number down here, it would be a decrease to cash or a credit to cash. Therefore, the positive number down here would be a debit amount. So the debit would down here would be positive, the credit would be negative. If these are kind of like income accounts, the unrestricted account needs to go up in the credit direction, and therefore we're going to make it a negative on the unrestricted. The restricted item, 2855, is going to be going down. It's a revenue account, therefore we need to debit it. So we're going to make that a positive number here. That could be a little bit confusing to think through with a check. I understand that, but just, if you can actually put this in one way and then the other, of course, and then check it. And then if it's going the wrong way, you can go back in here and adjust it as well. Now, the next thing we want to do is apply the job to it, because that's going to track the type of restriction that we have. Now, the only restriction that we have here is the education program and the permanent endowment. I'm going to put it into the permanent endowment. So I'm going to say this is part of the permanent endowment just to track that. So that's where we're going to put it. And we'll see that in the job report. And then we're going to say in the classes, it's going to be restricted. So we're going to put this into restricted. So what's this going to do then? It's going to be posting this journal entry. And when we look at the profit and loss by class, then it's going to be decreasing the column related to the related to the restricted on the income side. It's going to be increasing the column for the unrestricted and the profit and loss by class driven by these class identifications. Then when we want to look at more detail of this restricted item to see what the restricted is applied to, we will run the profit and loss by jobs. Profit and loss by job will then show the detail, and we put it into this permanent endowment restriction. So let's see what that will look like. Notice it's a zero check too. So we're going to say save and close, yes. And then we're going to go to the reports drop down. We're going to go to the company and financial. We'll first take a look at the profit and loss by class, changing the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. Then we're going to change the size, customizing the report, go into fonts and numbers and the font size to 11. We'll say okay, yes, and okay. So there we have that. Now we got the profit and loss by class. I'm going to minimize this window, and there we have it. So the restricted is going down by this amount, and the unrestricted is going up by that amount. So now we have this amount in the restricted. Now we want to see more detail within that restricted item. Therefore, we'll run the profit and loss by job. So we're going to go to the reports drop down up top, company and financial. We'll take a look at the profit and loss by job, and then change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. We'll customize that report. We're then going to go to the fonts and numbers, change the size, make it 11. Okay, yes please, and okay. So there we have that. And we're looking at, these are the three donor restrictions that we had. Actually, these aren't the donor restrictions. The donor restrictions are over here. I'd like to put them all the way on the left. So the way I can do that is I can then go to the customer dropdown, go to the customer center, and we made these subcategories. So these jobs in the subcategories, I'd like them to be on the left of our report and therefore on the top here. So I'm going to take this little diamond, left click on it, and drag this up to the top. And by doing that, it'll be the first thing that shows up on our report. So I'm going to close this back out. And then here's our report. Now we have these items. We have the permanent endowment and then the total jobs. Now, if we look at the totals here, then the total jobs is at, actually, we got the permanent endowment. I'm going to move this to the left. And we've got the education program restriction. So those are the two. The total adds up to that 1552. That 1552 then is going to be tied out to the profit and loss by job. As we can see here, the 1552. If we go back to the jobs report, we're also going to be using this jobs report to tie out to the balance sheet and tie out what the equity section should be for the restricted items for all open jobs that are open for the lifetime they've been opened by, and therefore would have to run the report back in time. And now we can see the more detail of these jobs. We only have 2 years of operations, so we have the more detail, and this amount is then what we're going to need to adjust in the equity section of the balance sheet. We'll see that at the end of our problem. We'll make that adjustment at the end of the month or year.